Yes, we are continuing to bounce our way through Hellboy, and I do mean bounce. Way back in episode 3 of the Random Trade Review, we covered volume 5 of Hellboy, The Conqueror Worm, and then about 100 or so episodes after that, we covered volume 3, The Chain Coffin. And today, well, we're covering volume 4.
In a way, this makes sense, however, as Hellboy's story really isn't told chronologically. If you remember, Volume 3 contains stories that took place before stories told in Volume 2, Wake the Devil. This is mainly due to the fact that many Hellboy stories appeared in anthology comics like Dark Horse Presents.
Such is the case today, as, well, 2 of the first 3 stories we're covering right now are, well, part of Dark Horse Presents, the third actually being customly written for this volume. So let us begin Hellboy, Volume 4, The Right Hand of Doom.
In 1947, the young Hellboy wakes up to breakfast at his new Air Force Base home. Though he wants a pot noodle, he'll have to settle for pancakes instead. Despite the youngster's claims that pancakes aren't really for him, one taste changes Hellboy's mind. Meanwhile, in hell, the demonic forces recoil in horror as the flapjack consumption means that Hellboy is now forever lost. Moving ahead 7 years to a time where Hellboy appears fully grown, he's dispatched to Sussex in England, where a private club needs him to kill a dragon. Back in 1500, said dragon battled with a monk in a very bloody confrontation. Eventually, though, the dragon was driven underground, and now the battlefield in question is covered in lilies where the monk's blood was spilled. However, the dragon has now appeared once more, and they have called upon Hellboy to try to defeat him, even bestowing the spear that monk used to kill the dragon the first time. However, this turns out to be a huge trap, as it turns out the dragon easily snaps the spear in question. While back at the club, its members proceed to plot out the fact that they were trying to use a demonic sacrifice to permanently drive the dragon away. The serpentine beast then begins trying to constrict Hellboy against the statue of the monk. However, this winds up being the creature's undoing, as the statue winds up crumbling and the monk's sword winds up slicing the creature in half. This greatly upsets the club, feeling that a demon like Hellboy was unworthy of such an honor. However, as Hellboy leaves the area, lilies begin growing where his blood is spilled. 2 years later, Hellboy's mentor, Professor Trevor Broom, asks the young adult to aid a colleague, Edmund Aikman, on an expedition to Norway. Aikman is looking to sightings of King Vold, the Flying Huntsman. It is said that Vold is cursed to hunt the area, and Aikman wonders if the sight of Hellboy could get the hunter to stop and slow down for a bit and know of a talk or two. And it's totally not a trap. Surprise, this turns out to be a trap, as Aikman points out that any human who aids Vold in a hunt is rewarded in gold. Vold has one of his hunting wolves attack Hellboy, and Aikman explains that he was only trying to trick Vold and get a little gold, which provides little help to Hellboy as he's knocked unconscious, and the wolf suddenly starts changing into a man.
Paul, you is a werewolf.
The werewolf is in reality the ghost of a long-dead Viking warrior class called the Berserker. The king soon returns with his quarry, a mermaid, and proceeds to pay Aikman in gold. Gold then immediately burns through the professor's hand. Vold then bids farewell to Hellboy, calling him a Nung Onrama as he leaves, and Hellboy soon revives, abandoning Professor Aikman to become a beggar on the streets of Copenhagen.
We now briefly turn away from Dark Horse Presents to instead cover 2 stories that were actually presented as backups. One in an Abe Sapien one-shot, and another in a book called Gary Gianni's The Monster Men. Then the story after that appeared in an entirely different anthology called Dark Horse Extra, which was sort of presented as a Sunday newspaper comics section. Look it up, kids. I'm so old.
Kyoto, Japan in 1957. Hellboy is looking for a spot to crash when he's offered lodging by a passerby who's throwing a dinner party. Hellboy hits the hay soon after arriving, but is soon woken up hours later by the sound of voices wishing to eat him. He finds the party's headless bodies in the foyer and proceeds to put things together that there's some type of yokai called Nukakobi. Hellboy proceeds to lure the heads out into the forest, where he doubles back and dispatches the bodies in a nearby pond. When the heads return and realize what happened, Hellboy begins fighting with them long enough for the sun to come out and destroying the spirits immediately. Jumping ahead to Portland, Oregon in 1979, Hellboy is called in to investigate the condition of a medium named Mr. Todd. Todd had felt his connection to the afterlife waning and began experimenting with hallucinogens to keep his act employed. Unfortunately, it worked a little too well, and now a massive demon is using Todd to cross over into the real world. Hellboy pulls out some Arberberis, an herb Greeks and Romans used to chase demons away. But before he can use it, the creature winds up grabbing him, so now it's up to Todd's assistant to light the Arberberis on fire, which winds up absorbing both the demon and Hellboy back into Todd. It's too late for Todd, though, as he's already dead, and Hellboy soon pops out of Todd's corpse in order to return to Earth. Moving on to Yorkshire, England in 1982, Hellboy visits the ruined castle belonging to Hungarian Countess and vampire Ilona Kilkoshi. He prepares to drive a stake through the Countess when suddenly the coffin gives way, revealing a hidden chamber. Dozens of bloodthirsty spirits begin swarming Hellboy, but the Countess calls them off as she's already summoned the Varkalok.
Varkaloks, in Greek Varakolkas, are basically human-animal hybrids that act a little bit more like zombies that travel the countryside draining people of their blood. In Slavic regions, Varkaloks are often also associated with Strigoi and Morai in providing the modern template for what we call vampires.
The Varkalok soon appears to face down Hellboy. Immediately, he chomps down on Hellboy's right hand. Of doom. Except this was all a vision that the Countess hoped would throw Hellboy off. It obviously hasn't, and so he winds up driving a stake right through her heart. Unfortunately, he forgets to decapitate the corpse, meaning the Countess will revive once the stake is removed.
It's here where we finally reach the Right Hand of Doom part of The Right Hand of Doom. That's followed immediately by a sequel story called Box Full of Evil.
Hellboy is in Spain visiting Father Adrian Frost, whose father Malcolm was one of the group that witnessed Hellboy's arrival on Earth. Malcolm was the individual most against taking the young demon in, however, and now Adrian wishes to explain what his father's actions were.
What follows here is a brief summary of the events of the first Hellboy story, Wake the Devil.
Hellboy recounts how he came to a mansion in England with Abe Sapien and Liz Sherman after Professor Broom was killed by a frog monster from the area. He discovered the revived Grigory Rasputin had appeared and arranged the events that had taken place, and he knows Hellboy's true nature. Hellboy played it off as he killed Rasputin, but over time he can't help but admit that his curiosity has been piqued. Adrian reveals that his father discovered an old Lemurian prophecy discussing the right hand of doom that could be used as a weapon, as it's been tied to the Ogdru Jihad.
The Ogdru Jihad are a collective of demons hell-bent on destroying God's domain. Now, they were imprisoned by Hellboy's right hand, which was soon grafted onto Hellboy shortly after he was born in the demon realm. At some point, Hellboy will be called upon to use his right hand to either free or destroy the Ogdru Jihad.
Adrian believes that Hellboy is a truly good person and can be trusted with a hand despite his father's doubts. He wishes peace on Hellboy, who still can't help but be a tiny bit perturbed by the fact that he wields something called the Right Hand of Doom. Hellboy meets up with Abe Sapien, and they move on to England once more, where they have been tasked to investigate an occurrence where a house is broken into by a man carrying a candelabra in the shape of a human hand. The residents of the manor wanted to stop the man, however they were just somehow frozen in place and given the vision of a castle far out in the English countryside. It's then that Hellboy discovers that this building was once a convent consecrated by St. Dunstan.
St. Dunstan was a bishop and archbishop in England who is said to have one day trapped the devil by catching his nose in a pair of blacksmithing tongs.
The burglar in question is someone from Hellboy's past named Bromhead, who was hired by the Countess Bologna and her husband to retrieve the box said to contain the devil's spirit. The box appears empty, save for a small fly, which zips into Bologna's mouth. Soon, she's possessed and begins transforming into a demon while turning her husband into a chimp. She then attempts to turn Bromhead into either a lizard or a pig, only to be halted by the fact the thief is wearing a pendant of St. Dunstan. Added to that, Bromhead knows the demon's true name, Zabauth, meaning that he now has control over it.
Bromhead wishes to know Hellboy's true name so he can control him the way he's controlling Zabauth. And that name, well, as King Gold said, it's Anum Anurama.
Hellboy and Abe manage to track down the castle's location, and soon after arriving, Abe gets jumped by the chimp count. Bromhead and Zabauth then emerge to hold Hellboy in place while uttering Anun Anurama, causing the demon's horns to regrow and a flaming crown to appear over his head. While the chimp count begins torturing Abe, Zabauth winds up grabbing said flaming crown and growing stronger in the process. Bromhead then begins beating Hellboy with a pair of pincers, intending on severing the right hand of doom. As this happens, Hellboy is visited by a vision of demons who point out that Anung Unrama really isn't his name, as he's never really used it. This allows Hellboy to regain his strength and break free to begin fighting with Zabauth, and Abe does the same with the chimp count. In the midst of the struggle, Bromhead's pendant of St. Dunstan is smashed, causing a vision of the saint to appear and turn him into a lizard. Hellboy breaks off his horns once more and plunges them into Zabauth, who attempts to flee by returning to his fly form. However, Hellboy manages to catch the demon in his right hand of doom and then topples out of the castle, where he's greeted by the vision of St. Dunstan. Hellboy turns the fly over to Dunstan, who it turns out is actually the real devil in disguise, and it was very upset that Zabauth has been cashing in on his name for a few centuries. The devil bids Hellboy adieu, promising to see him once more, next time in hell, as Abe manages to kill the chimp who still remains a chimp. Later, Hellboy meets with Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense agent Kate Corrigan. The two talk about destiny and what it means to truly have fate. Hellboy decides that fate really isn't for him, and he'll fight for good as long as he's needed to. However, as the two leave, the denizens of hell from Hellboy's vision look on, and they're not entirely sure, as Hellboy's fate is always up in the air.
And that concludes our look at Hellboy Volume 4, The Right Hand of Doom. How was it? Well, on the plus side, there's some great artwork in here as usual that does a good job of capturing that old pulp adventure feel and blending some good horror elements. The stories blend both humor and horror exceedingly well, and I do think this is a very good exploration of Hellboy's character and his overall existence in the world. If there's a downside, I would say the supporting cast is kind of lacking, unfortunately. I tend to like a lot of the Hellboy stories involve him and the BPRD and him interacting with people, and well, he doesn't really do much of that in this, and to be honest, the stories in here are maybe just a little too short. This is a very paltry collection. I don't mean that in a bad way. Like I said, the stories overall are fine, they're good, but I mean, when you have to put 8 pages of sketch work in the back, yeah, you're filling this out to try to meet a quota. So, yeah, it's not, like I said, it's not terrible, it's very enjoyable, it's overall a plus, but again, like I said, the stories are kind of meager. There's a lot of 2-page, 3-page adventures in here. Heck, the titular Right Hand of Doom story is still not that long. It's only about 15 pages. So, again, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of meat on the bone here. And to be honest, again, this one's probably a minor nitpick, but some of the stories get a little repetitive. I mean, our first 2 stories are Hellboy trusting someone and it turning out to be a trap. Yeah, so, again, not necessarily bad. Overall, this is still very enjoyable, but I don't know if I would recommend this particular volume for a first-time Hellboy reader. There are better volumes to jump on at. I am going to give Hellboy Volume 4, The Right Hand of Doom, a B. Like I said, it's not bad, it's enjoyable, but not a good jumping-on point. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, remember you can help support the channel at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcat productions. There you can request a trade to be put in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box. And as always, remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.
Werewolf?
No, werewolf. Where? Say it.